Good morning. I hope all of you had a fantastic first session today morning. This is an interesting topic that we chose to talk about, chip to cloud. And interestingly, just to introduce myself and Cyient, Cyient is a $750 million plus company and been in the industries of aerospace, automotive, semiconductors, medical devices, and the energy transition areas. And we also have done a 3-nanometer node technology design for semiconductors, and we also have a design house in Hyderabad for 5 nanometers, and probably one of the very few companies that is into the 5-nanometer design from India. And we also have designed, along with IIT Hyderabad, a narrowband 5G IoT silicon from spec to tape out, and very interesting project that we executed with them for the last 2 years. And this also received some special Prime Minister award during the last year's Semicon event. And with that, just to set a context of, last 3 years has been a tumultuous journey for many of us, right? Work from home, hybrid, and trying to really understand the supply chain, which really got the center stage. And if you look at most of the enterprises, supply chain was taken for granted. And suddenly it came alive. And when I interacted with some of the semiconductor companies, they never used to interact with OEMs who are 3 levels up, and they always felt they don't need to know who the semiconductor suppliers were. And now they were on the table discussing with the OEMs 3 levels up, and they were really trying to share their capacity plans, what is it they can commit, and how do you think they're going to really make something happen. And this is something which is never seen before, and one thing for sure is the supply chain would probably be more resilient in the next few years than what happened before pandemic. And there are a few interesting numbers to quote in terms of what happened in the last 12, 24 months related to semiconductor. More than $250 billion have been committed to build fabs across various countries, and 2 CHIPS Act have been enacted, one for EU, one for US, and with $50 billion plus, both of them. And this $250 billion investments have been committed across US, Europe, Japan, China, India, and I think the geopolitical things also come into play with, hope this is not some fire alarm. Sorry. I didn't realize that it is from my phone. Oh, from everyone. Okay, sorry. So this is something that we have not seen before, with significant interest coming from every country. And I remember talking to some of the colleagues that we have from Germany and Belgium, and they said some of the universities are restarting silicon design after 10 years. Because there were no takers in the last 10 years, and suddenly there is a huge spurt in terms of demand. And my son, he is currently graduating from Purdue, and he said in the campus interview that happened last month, he said out of 350 companies, 90 companies are semiconductor companies. He suddenly asked me, what happened to semiconductors? Why is that there is so much of interest on semiconductors? And this is something which he said in the last 5 years, they've hardly had 4 or 5 companies looking for talent from the computer engineering graduates. And more importantly, the significant milestone to me is a hardware company getting a $1 trillion market cap. Nobody expected that NVIDIA would join the league of $1 trillion plus market cap companies. I think this kind of really shows there is a lot of money waiting to come. Everybody wants to be the next NVIDIA, and this will really create a huge venture capitalist as well as the PE fund that's going to chase the semiconductor industry for the next few years. And also important things to look at, the intelligence would either be stored in silicon or software, right? I think this is another thing that has really be a big change. And interestingly, if you look at last 100 years, the first 50, 60 years dominated by the mechanical engineers. The last 30, 40 years, it is electronics, microelectronics, semiconductors. And interestingly, I was hearing from one of the large semiconductor customer, and who said they always used to design the hardware and then make the software to match the hardware. And in the last 3-4 years, they want to have a software platform that will choose the hardware, not the other way. I think this is the big change, and this change is here to stay for many more years. And gone are the days of dominance of hardware dominating the software versus software dominating the hardware. ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, and it has become a natural language for all of us, and suddenly in less than, 8 or 9 months, I'm sure last time when we had this event, we didn't talk about ChatGPT, and suddenly it has become a natural language for every one of us. And this is also making artificial intelligence to be consumable for everyone. This is not going to be something which is available for only large companies or tech companies. It is something that all of us can touch and feel. And this is also transitioning into a big league of automotive companies becoming computer on wheels, and high performance companies, data storage, and computing along with wireless are going to be the growth engines for the next 5 to 10 years. I think this industry is likely to get to a $1 trillion industry before end of this decade. And my hunch is it should probably triple in the next 15 years after 2030. So get to about $3 to $3.5 trillion by 2045 or so. So with that, I think the key element is semiconductor cannot be ignored. I think it is part of everybody's critical chain, and this is really be at the center stage in the last 2 years. And thanks to pandemic, thanks to the supply chain issues, thanks to NVIDIA, which caught the imagination of the whole world. Having said that, I think it is an interesting topic to have it along with Mr. Rajamanickam, who spent 43 years in the industry, and interestingly, he spent the entire career, and he has seen the transition of how things are really getting to be dominated in the future. And also India has also made some of the moves over the last 2 years, and just interesting to hear some of his views. And I would probably get started with the panel discussion that we plan to do today. And welcome to the conversation, Mr. Rajamanickam. And do you want to give opening remarks in terms of how did this industry evolve in the last 40 years, and what did you see in your lifetime?
Thank you, Karthik. Yeah, as you said, 43, now you can guess my age. And I only know semiconductors. Since day one I've been in this, so I'll stay focused on this. Karthik stated a lot of the facts of what's going on and so on. I will give you my view, right, more than facts are there for you to see. When I started in the semiconductor, we were all very vertically integrated, right? I was from TI, and we had the equipment. TI made the equipment. We had our own fab, we had our own packaging plant, and everything else was all vertically integrated. That was the early 80s and so forth, right? And then, the one by one, it got out, and then now you got all this outsourced model and so forth. And then there was this, companies that became very large, right? There's a lot of consolidation that happened and so forth. Now, before we go, moving forward, my views on that, right? If you look at the industry today, right, what you hear about, right, it makes for a very good Netflix movie, if you may, right? Big money is involved, right? Whenever you talk about semiconductor, you talk about big money, right? You don't talk about millions, it's always billions. And companies are very large, right? There's a lot of, and most of the companies are highly profitable, right? I was reading this morning about Samsung. They said, they had a very poor quarter, like 75% reduction in profit or something. But still they made like, 1.6 billion or something like that, right? And and they're worried about it, right? So there's a lot of money, right? And there's a lot of money flowing between countries, so there's a lot of cash flow moving and all that. I think, Netflix should pick it up. And then there's also land involved, right? They always talk about, give us land, give us this and that, to build this. And then there's geopolitics. So it's good for making a movie as well. So my point is, it is a little bit of a mafia kind of industry. Okay, I don't know whether. Please don't quote me anywhere else, because the real estate guys might be worried. Semiconductor might take over them. It's a very intriguing industry, but I think the fortunate thing about this is, if you look at historically, it is built by very strong techie people, right? If you look at, TSMC and all that, right? The deep engineering and deep physics people are the ones who build this industry, right? So if you look at Broadcom or Qualcomm, you look at all those founders, right? They were not business people, or they were not, people trying to aggregate something, right? They were very deep thinkers who started these kind of companies, right? Now, can that be sustained, and is that the future? I feel, right, one of the topics here we talk about the cloud and so forth. India has a very unique value proposition, if you may, right? We all know that from a resource standpoint, right, the number of people, the scaling, the capability we have, and distributed, right? If you look at the Zoho model, right, I mean, he proved that, you could distribute the way you deliver, right? So I think, there is a element that in semiconductor as well, instead of having 100 people design, right, you can have tens and thousands of people designing a same system, if you may, right? You could. And with the cloud, there is even more possibilities of doing that. You basically, democratizing the whole flow. So what I had seen before versus what I think is going to move forward, you need to think differently, completely differently. We don't need to take the old baggage and say, look, India wants to get into semiconductors and this is how it has been done. So let us, try to ape this, right? We've done very well in a way, doing services for others, right? Someone else has done the flow, and then we provide a service to, in terms of labor and people. I mean, we're very good at that, right? But I think we have an opportunity now, and that is very unique to India because of the scale that we can do, the kind of deep expertise that we can bring. To me, what is missing is the different aspects of it. And one thing about, I was just giving an interview on this Gen Z, right? I don't know what is Gen Z, and I don't know what generation I come from. I'm probably Gen A or Gen B or something, I guess, right? But the good thing about these Gen Z is, they're willing to break the chain, right? They do things differently. They're very good at, using various kind of tools, right? Very, very fast learners, right? They could pick up things very fast. And they always question. And one other thing, which Indians in general, again, I'm just generalizing, because when I went to the US, right, what I found was their teamwork was very good, right? When they know what they can do and what they cannot do. And so they appreciate those who can do, and they say, look, I'm not good at this guy is good at this, right? So they were very good at teamwork, and you can see that in their sports and all the stuff that they do, right? Whereas I thought, Indians in general, we were always very individual, right? We always want to be better than the other guy, right? If he can do it, I want to be better than him. But I think the Gen Z, in my view, is a lot more collaborative, right? They're willing to work, and they see the power of collaboration. So I think all these elements are coming together. And if you look at the tools going to the clouds and the distribution, distributed kind of work becoming a common practice in multiple segments, right? It's not only in tech. So I believe and then the strongest point of all is you in nasscom, you have your software, right? I always believe that the software should be driving the hardware. It has always been the other way, right? We build something and then we try to build some stacks on top of it and so on. But I think there is an inflection point where all of these elements are coming together, and there is an opportunity for us to change the narrative, right? That if there's one thing I would tell you is, as younger people, get into deep domain knowledge which is missing for us, and semiconductor is process. Unfortunately, we don't have any fabs and so forth here. So, plan your life in that sense that, I want to gather the missing links in this, the entire process. And I think, we can change the narrative. I think 5 or 10 years from now, there's going to be very, very large system companies coming out of India, providing unique solutions that don't exist today. So that's kind of my opening remark, although it took a little bit of time.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Raja. Interestingly, Bangalore is one of the 4 hotspots of semiconductor design. I keep saying that the center of gravity for semiconductor design has moved to outer ring road of Bangalore with a traffic jam plus 30,000 plus engineers in one place. It's definitely not from me. So this is something that all of us are proud of, that more than 20% of the silicon designs happening out of India, and a lot of them happen out of Bangalore too. And interestingly, with fabless, with software-led, and with AI-led, I think India has a huge opportunity to leapfrog in many of these areas, and that's something we'll really talk about it in the next few minutes. Just interesting based on what you just said, and I'll come back to the Gen Z and Gen A as the last question in terms of, I think you coming up in a Goan shirt and trying to do a startup at the age of what you are doing today is a big inspiration for many of the youngsters here to really pursue something which is very different. And you dedicated your entire career for semiconductor and you're passionate about it. I think it was definitely clear from what you said. Just a couple of questions on, if you take the electronic value chain, there is only about 15-20% that is happening out of India. And what are the ideas that you think the value chain can be enhanced and the percentage of contribution could be increased? And do you have any specific ideas on this, Raja?
Yeah. One thought is, we always talk about IP, right? We say, our strength is IP, we are the smart people, we create the IPs. The smarter people financially are not the creators of the IP, they are the monetizers of the IP. Right? We've all startups, they grow to maybe $5, $10, $20 million type of companies. And then they kind of stagnate, right? They're very, very proud of the IPs. And then we have, some Korean companies or some other guys, who take this IP, put them together, create products, and then they, sell it for hundreds, 200 million, they become much bigger. So I think we have this fascination for IPs, and because we have a lot of pride in creating IPs, and Indians are very good at IP and so forth, right? To me, IPs are worthless unless you figure out some use for it, right? And the use, how do you create the value chain in that sense, right? One is, of course, the financial runway you need in order to do that, and then the ecosystem that needs to support it. Again, I believe, right, we're at a kind of inflection point, right? I can see some of the downstream companies are coming up, right? The only caution is, instead of just focusing on the IPs, right, you start from on the system side of things and always, think about how you're going to build systems. And IPs, you can gather it from everywhere, right? There's a lot of IPs created by startups. There are IPs created by EDA companies. There are IPs created by fab people and so forth. But I think really, you got to move away from this fascination for just creating IPs and then living in the glory. If you want to really be a product company, you got to figure out how to collaborate and move. And I think people like me and others who have worked outside, who've built the entire flow, and that kind of knowledge needs to come into India, and I think it is coming. So I think it's a very, very good point to build product companies out of India, and eventually India will become an export hub, because geopolitically also, right, that alignment is happening.
Interesting. And also, I think with what you talked about on IPs, interesting to look at the nanometers which are getting to 2 nanometers, likely to get commercialized by 2024. And the shrinkage is going to be a difficult one, and Moore's law may get challenged. So the advanced packaging, whether it is trying to vertically stack, and how do you think the silicon designs would evolve? And the EDA workloads moving to cloud, and chip designs happening in cloud. And how do you really see this IP development plus some of the technology interventions having a role in this future?
I'm not a fab guy, so I can't talk too much about it. Other than, again, we always, whenever we talk about fab, we always talk about 3 nanometer or 2 nanometer or an angstroms or so. I have no idea why they actually create all those things. The world is okay with, I think, 22 nanometer or 28 nanometer. Anyway, that's my view. But I think, coming back, I think the packaging is where the innovation is happening. I come from that area, post-silicon. Lots and lots of activity in that, packaging innovation, creating the end products, right? So now, if you look at the innovation happening at package level, now you have to have system knowledge, right? So your system is the package. So now you try to integrate more and more onto this. So I think that those are the opportunities. So I keep saying this, right? Think at it from a system viewpoint, and then semiconductor is just an enabler. When I was at TI, right, we used to produce all these blocks, and then you have to make a system out of these blocks, right? You got to put these blocks together, and then you build a system. Now it is, you flip it the other way, right? You create a system. It could be, a software system, a function system, let's say, a medical product or whatever. And then the semiconductor is just an enabler to make that happen. And a lot of that is happening at the package level, right? So the package becomes the system. And that requires lots and lots of engineering, lots of customized engineering. Again, right, our scaling, the resource that we have is best suited for this as well. So think about, I always say that, you want to dominate certain areas, right? Do you want to dominate, 2 nanometer, 3 nanometer? I think it's a pie in the sky. It takes lots and lots of, tribal knowledge to get there. But I think, this areas, where I talk about packaging innovation, system innovation, we're at the cusp of getting into it. We have a very, very strong foundation that we can build on, and we can dominate that space. Right? So whatever you choose, right, think about how you want to dominate that particular space. If you want to dominate, that means you need to understand the deep physics, the deep engineering behind it as well. So you need people in your team that can do that, not just business people.
Sure, I'll open the floor for a couple of questions before we try to summarize. Can you get the mic, please?
Okay, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
So you said a point that India is in a very beautiful situation where previously in services industry we just following what the world is doing, but out here we are in this situation where we in the semiconductor domain where we can do things differently, where we can lead rather than just following. Can you specify one such differentiating factor or one such thing which India can lead on, rather than just following what is being happening hitherto so far?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm personally doing some research on, right? In the renewable energy side of things, right? Now, renewable energy, you have a lot of storage requirements, because a lot of renewable energy is not consumed, right? It's wasted because it's very unpredictable when you need it versus when it's produced. So now the solutions are, battery, it seems to be the only solution. And there's a lot of leakages that happens, right? There's a lot of leakage, so probably about 15-20% of what you produce actually doesn't get used, right? So now you take that as a problem and then you try to solve that, right? You're going to solve the problem for the world, right? So how do you create that? So there's a lot of semiconductor involved in that, right? So that, you reduce any of the leakage, right? From a system level leakage, and then you have storage. So how do you extract every picowatt that comes out of solar, right? So there is a lot of algorithms you need to develop so that you optimize your storage, you optimize your grid, and so forth. So I think just one of the solutions, right? So you're not thinking about trying to make the next best inverter, right? The inverters are coming from China and so forth, right? So now you could take a lead on it, right? Not necessarily try to make a better inverter, but you try to solve the overall problem. And India is probably the best test bed for all of these things, right? Because our scale is bigger, we have a lot of issues, we have a very chaotic way of doing things. So whatever solutions that we come up with, right, will be a global solution. So we can take a lead.
Sorry, we are running out of time, so one last question, yeah, please.
Hey, Raja, every conference I go to, there is this question of chicken and egg, right? There is no semiconductor manufacturing in India because there is no ecosystem. There is no ecosystem because there is no manufacturing. When will we get the omelette?
When will you?
When will we get the omelette?
I know Suraj will always ask me this difficult question. I was worried he's going to be here. So I'm a big believer that we need to have a fab, okay? And when I'm working with these Taiwanese companies, there are many small Taiwanese companies, maybe 25, 30 people companies, and their revenues are $200, $300 million revenue. And just 25, 30 people. They're product companies, they're not service companies, right? And the reason I see is the difference is these companies are actually formed by process engineers coming out of TSMC or UMC and so on, right? And we miss that, right? We have great designers, we have tens and thousands of designers. But the one missing link is that process knowledge and how to integrate it and get the product out with the kind of yield, the kind of leakage currents that we need and so forth, right? And I think it's so important that we have that. And we need to have it here, and we need to have our engineers very, very familiar with it. It's like, it's the back of your hand, right? You know that, right? So I think, the efforts that the government is making, and hopefully, some big boys, have the courage to come in. When I say big boys, I'm talking about Indian big boys, not necessarily, the MNCs. I doubt the MNCs or the TSMCs of the world will come. But I think the big boys of India need to step up, right? Whether it's the Reliance or the Tatas or whoever it is. Because there is a very, very good opportunity here. Once you create that process knowledge here internally, the sky is the limit.
Sure, one last personal question to you, Rajav, and since there's a message is for the Gen Zs, and since you started the conversation with Gen Zs and Gen As, you wanting to get onto entrepreneurship at the age of 60 plus, and we really wanted to have a lot of children of the people who are participating here or the young students. What is your message to them, and how do they really see their future, and what should they really think about to be an entrepreneur or to really create a better value for the country as well?
Yeah, no, good point. As I said, right, they're more unlike us, right? When I first graduated, right, I just wanted a job, right? I didn't know better, right? And the parents, will tell you, hey, get a good job, it's a government job or some big American company or something, right? So that was our goal, just getting a job and and getting into it, right? And when I told after I got married, I told my father-in-law I want to start a company. He said, look, I gave you my daughter only because you're working in TI, right? You want to go and start a company, I would not even have agreed to this, right? So you better stay in TI. So I started my company only when I was 48, right? And that was 20 years ago, so now you can guess where I am, okay? So and then I'll tell you another antidote. Recently I met this guy, young fellow, just started, in Tesla, right? Maybe 2-3 years ago he was in Tesla. So I asked him, Tesla is a hard company to work for, right? They really squeeze you, in terms of work-wise. So I said, why did you go to Tesla? And, he said, sir, this is the future, right? Electric cars, electric batteries, and Tesla is the kind of leader in this. I want to go into this. I want to work here for 5 to 6 years. I want to learn how they do things. I don't want to just do design or something. I want to go into all the different departments and learn how this whole thing works. He's a young guy. He's only like 23 years old, right? He already has a plan. He says, at 28, I'm out. And that was, like mind-boggling to me. At 23, I would never have thought about this, right? So I think, the awareness is there. I think we are living in a time where opportunities are opening up big time. And India is, the Chandrayaan moment, right, has really catapulted us, right? I was in Japan at that time, and there was a lot of people were talking about this. India can do it. India can do it, right? As a team, right? The teamwork. So I believe, if you ask me, the youngsters, spend a few years with the MNCs, learn the trick of the trade, if you may, right? The first few years, spend more time on understanding and deep diving into what really drives you, right? Whether it's the physics behind it or the deep engineering behind it, really, really focus on it versus getting your promotions and getting, a little bit more money, right? And then you think about 5 years, 10 years from then, that you can really build off that foundation. That would be my thought.
Thank you, Rajab. I think with that, I would just sum it up saying that semiconductor would be a critical segment for the next 10, 20 years, and India has a great potential, and we have an opportunity to really be the center of gravity on the silicon design, and especially with a lot of changes that are happening around compute, high performance compute, and artificial intelligence, and automotive, and hope India takes advantage of it, and many of you in this room would help to grow this business significantly over the decade. Thank you so much for this time. Thank you.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.